Good morning. Today we look at 1 Samuel 27, 28, and 29. It means that tomorrow we'll finish this book of 1 Samuel, but in this, David has been running, hiding, escaping, and letting Saul go free when he had chances. But, as we begin today, it says, David said in his heart, he's understanding and he's, talking to himself basically, but he's saying, Saul is one of these days, he's going to be successful in killing me. So I just need to leave. I need to put distance between us. And so he takes his 600 men and his wives, his family, and he goes to this area of Gath and talks to King Achish. And he stays there for a while. And after he's been there for a while, he talks to the king and says, I've been living peacefully among you. How about, giving me a place that's kind of my own? If I have found favor in your sight, let a place be given me in one of your country towns so that I may live there. And so the king, seeing David and everything that he's been doing and understanding what's going on, gives this town Ziklag, whichever. And that town, it says, belongs to the king of Judah yet to this day. And of course that's, when this book is written down, years later. But so David and his army are there, and they go and they raid other lands, further away, not lands that this king Achish would be having, but lands further away, and totally destroying everyone there and coming back with the plunder. And, and the king, wonders about this. And well, David says to pull the wool over his eyes, or lies, he just lies. And he says, well, I've been going and raiding some of the Israelite lands, and king, hey, that's good, thumbs up, to him. And what the reality is that David is going further away, in further away lands. And the time comes when the Philistine king decides he's going to war against the Israelites again. And David and his men, it's been looking like they're loyal citizens to this Philistine king, the way they've been living and everything. And the king comes to David and says, I'm gathering my armies. I would like you to come along with, And so here's David. He's in a hard spot, right? Do you go and you battle against King Saul and your people? Or do you show your true allegiance to this king who has been generous to you and say, hey, no way. But fortunately for David, things happen in his favor. But before that happens, Saul has been seeking a message from God. The Philistine king is coming, and the armies are coming, and Saul, since Samuel has died, has been looking for a message from God. It's in chapter 28, verse 3. And Saul had expelled, it says, all of the mediums and wizards, the false prophets. But, when the Philistines were gathering for battle, he says, man, I need to talk to Samuel. I need to have some insight from God. So he asks about, is there a medium? Is there, one of these people around here anymore? And they tell him about this particular woman. So he disguises himself and he goes there and he asks, for her to bring a spirit, and she says, she asks, well, who would you like me to bring? And it's, of course, Samuel. But before that, it's, Saul had inquired, it says in verse 6, he had inquired of the Lord, not by dreams, not by, or by Urim, and the Urim and the Thummim, those were sacred objects that were used to divine messages then by lot, casting lots for them. And we had seen that, when Saul had cast lots between himself and Jonathan back in chapter 14. But anyway, Saul had no answer. So he goes to this medium, and she says, this woman says, well, surely you know what Saul has done, how he has cut off all of the mediums and wizards from the land. Why are you laying a snare for my life? But Saul, promises, this is okay. And sure enough, she's able to bring Samuel up, and she realizes then, she says, you are Saul. What are you doing? And he tells her, no, I'm not going to hear you, And Saul asks, well, what do you see? I see an old man in robes coming up. And Saul knows it's Samuel. And Samuel's response is, why have you disturbed me by bringing me up? I am in great distress, Saul answered, for the Philistines are warring against me. God has turned away from me. What should I do? And Samuel says, why do you ask me, since the Lord has turned away and become your enemy? The Lord has done just as he spoke of through me to you, that since you abandoned the Lord and since you didn't do what the Lord had said, the Lord is no longer walking with you. And because you did not obey the voice of the Lord, verse 18, and did not carry out his fierce wrath, therefore the Lord has done this thing against you today. And the Lord will give the Israel along with you into the hands of the Philistines. And tomorrow you and your sons will be with me. In this battle, Samuel has just told Saul that he and his sons will die in that battle. And they will be then they will be dead, just like Samuel. And Saul fell to the ground, and he was weak. It says he hadn't eaten anything, and this medium and his people that are with him finally in time get Saul to sit up and eat something, and it's kind of surprising to me too, there, that it says the woman had a fatted calf in the house. She quickly slaughtered it. You would just do that. It's just, okay, but, it's for the king. I understand that, but it's just, the way all the things work out But anyway, the Philistines in chapter 29 gathered all their forces, and they came. And as the Philistines were gathered there, some of the lords, some of the lords, the captains of the crews, the people that were leaders from the towns that had come, whatever, go to the king and say to him, hey, we're not going if David's going. He is an Israelite. What's going to stop him from, in the middle of the battle, right in the midst of us, turning against us? And so David is freed from that catch-22 he's been in, that rock and a hard spot. Do I fight against my people, or do I abandon this person who's been good to me? Well, David doesn't have to make that decision, because these others make it for him. And the king says, I guess you better go back. The others won't fight if you're with us that way. So David is set free from that terrible dilemma that he was in, to be going up battling against Saul and the Israelite army. Because, in verse 5, these lords, these other leaders, they say to this king, this is David, who they say of, Saul killed his thousands and David his 10,000s. Even the Philistines, they knew that. They had heard that. And, through all of the channels that go around of conversation. And so David is able to escape being in that hard spot, and is able then to, it says verse 11, the last verse we look at, David set out with his men early in the morning to return to the land of the Philistines. But the Philistines went up to Jezreel. And Jezreel is the place where this big battle will take place, as we're going to read about tomorrow. But, again, we can, when we look at it from back a ways, objectively, we can see how God is, has pulled his support from Saul and is protecting and providing David, who has anointed the king now as well. And, it's just the way everything is working out. It's, sometimes we wonder, well, God, where are you? And that's the predicament Saul was in. God, why won't you answer me? What if, but he's forgetting that he had deliberately turned away and not done what the Lord God had told him to do. And I guess, we sin every day as well, and we have a God that's filled with love and grace, and that's, and we see that God even in some of the trials and the troubles of the Old Testament.